everybody. Listen, it's time to get America back to work, don't you think? One of the things we got to stop doing is fighting ourselves. The new politics of America has become take one part of our middle class and pit it against the interests of another part of our middle class. And you know what? It's working for somebody out there, but it's not working for our middle class here in America, and it's certainly not working for the building trades. You know, I grew up in an America that was a true believer in investment on a long-term basis. I tell this story about my mother. For the 29 years that we shared the earth together, she would say to me, "Daniel, you have an obligation to leave the world a better place for your having lived in it." And we did that in America. We understood that we had to build a stronger educational system, and we built it. We understood that we had to have a great transportation system, and we built it. We understood we needed to have a great economy, and we built it. And then somewhere and somehow, we've lost our way. I'm tired of listening to these congressmen and senators who go over to Europe or go over to Asia, and they come back and they talk about how great the airports are, or how great the railroads are, or how much is being done on the economic development front or on the energy front. And then they come back here to the United States and they fail to support working men and women, particularly in the building trades. It's not right, and we got to stop it. We need change in Washington, and we got to do it state by state by state first. If you believe as I do that we have a sacred obligation to make America stronger each and every day that we're here, then you agree with me that we have to have better schools, that kids should not be going into antiquated school buildings, that people shouldn't be on college campuses with buildings that were built 50, 60, 100, 150 years ago and haven't been modernized in many cases since. If you agree as I do that the best way out of a long-term recession is to turn it around in the building trades to make sure that we're building infrastructure for America's tomorrow, then we have work to do, not just in this room, but in every state capital across this country. Now, I have to tell you, I'm proud to be governor of the state of Connecticut. For whatever period of time I'm here, I get to do things. I get to build schools. I get to design an energy policy that will require new pipelines be laid in the state of Connecticut. I get to argue the case of bridges and mass transit, and to make sure that we turn this state over to somebody someday in better shape than we found it. And I could not have better allies in doing that than the men and women of the trades that are represented here. You get it. You understand what it took to build a middle class. You've allowed us to raise everyone up in Connecticut and in the United States. In many ways, you were the tide that raised all boats. We would not have the middle class in America the way we have it today, even under attack, but for the labor movement in the United States. There are people out there who talk against the labor movement who benefit from it every single day. One of the things that happened to me when I became governor is I inherited a state that had underinvested in itself. It had lost confidence in itself. It absolutely believed that its best days were behind it, not before it. And that's a tough situation to resolve. When politicians go out and convince people that things can't be done, that's when we know we're in decline. Connecticut today is a state where we all argue how much more can be done, how much greater our infrastructure could be. Why aren't we investing more in progress? Why aren't we investing more in our colleges and our local educational institutions? Why aren't we investing more in our rail network? That's a very different conversation taking place in Connecticut today than existed just 3.5 years ago when they were cutting spending on capital investment. I could name 20 or 30 projects that we've gotten going or are laying the tracks for right now as we speak. But here's a special message for you. We're doing many of those projects with project labor agreements, under signature, on time, on budget. The best quality work in America is being done right now in Connecticut. From our college campuses at the University of Connecticut in Storrs, to Farmington Medical Center and research facilities, to our other private and public universities, we are investing money in our middle class as we prepare Connecticut for its future of preparing another middle class, and another middle class, and another middle class. This attack that you've been under in so many ways and in so many of the states that you come from is totally unfair. Let me assure you that Connecticut, we believe in you, and we believe in the right to organize, and we believe in the right to negotiate, and yes, we believe even in having procedures to resolve differences between us. We understand that America is stronger when it works together. Americans are stronger when they lift one another up. This is a sacred promise we make to ourselves, to our fellow citizens, and to our children. An America that is strong and will survive and will grow again. But you can't have it unless you're investing. You can't have it unless you're building the kinds of things that this great nation needs. Some of those are on a local level. Have a PLA do it. Some of those are on a state level. Have a PLA do it. Some of those are on a national level. Let's get to the day when we have PLAs operating throughout this country to make sure that you're doing well. In Connecticut, we're investing more in infrastructure on our highway and transit systems than ever before. We've laid out a plan for $1.4 billion in spending in the next year. We've taken on projects such as a modernization of our universities, where we're spending billions of dollars to make sure that we have the kinds of universities that we can all be proud of and will do the job into the future. We're working with the private sector, as you heard, bringing new jobs in the state of Connecticut, having created over 43,000 private sector jobs in a small state since I became governor. It's not enough. We have to do more. And the way to do more is to work together. Not to be divided, not to allow ourselves to be divided by those who would separate us so that they could conquer us all, but rather to work together to make sure that our children and grandchildren do as well as we aspire to do for ourselves. In the state of Connecticut, we've gone in a different direction. We're not like some of the states that you came from, where governors actually see it as their responsibility to make you weaker, to make our brothers and sisters in public work weaker. We're not having the argument about how quickly we can weaken labor. We're actually having the argument about how more closely we can work together to get more people back to work in our state and in our nation. So this is what we need to do. We need to change the discussions that are taking places in the churches, in the school halls after school, or in the evening at the PTA and PTO halls or meetings around. We need to change, quite frankly, the discussion in some of your own halls, where we've lost some of our brothers and sisters who now kind of buy the argument that the only way to solve a problem is to cut back as opposed to invest more. We need to have a national discussion about a national disgrace. And that is, for the first time in our country's history, we are preparing to turn over a weaker country to the generation that comes behind us. I'm not talking about the military. I'm talking about the bridges and the highways and the interchanges and the exits and entrances, about the public school buildings, about the public buildings themselves, about the hospital buildings. Somehow, in some way, the conversation has thus far convinced too many Americans that our best days are behind us. And if we're not having that argument, if we're not having that discussion in the halls I talked about, then we're going to lose for another generation. Now, I know you're invested in the future of 3 million members, and I'm invested in the future of my state and my nation. But we've got to step it up again. We've got to do a better job. We have to say no when people are wrong. And we have to point out to our members and our friends and our constituents and our citizenry that we cannot be the first generation to leave America weaker in infrastructure than the way we found it. And if we do win that argument, we're talking about creating tens of thousands, if not 1 million jobs in this nation. We have to have the conversation about how we fund it. We have to have the conversation about the proper role for the federal government to play. We have to have the conversation on our state capitals about how state capitals have to lead forward, not fall back. But if we win this argument, if we win this discussion, then brighter and better days are before us. When I became governor of the state of Connecticut, unemployment in the building trades was in excess of 50%. And we've cut that by over 60%, 65% since I've been governor. And by the way, my total debt in my state is $11.6 billion less than it was the day I came into office. But we didn't do it on the backs of labor. And we didn't do it on the backs of a failure to invest. In fact, relationships with labor and relationships with respect to building infrastructure for education and other reasons is a core part of our strategy. I don't want to be governor of a state where people don't want to be, because the roads are bad, or the schools are bad, or higher education is faulting, or the rail system is allowed to deteriorate, or you can't get enough natural gas into the state. I want to be governor of a state in a union of states where we can all be proud of what we've accomplished together. You invited me to be here today. My friends from Connecticut back in that corner invited me to be here today, and I want to thank you for it. Because as much as I'm speaking and as loud as I'm speaking, I got to tell you, my batteries get charged when I'm with people like you, who care about their members, who care about this nation, and who care about our future. We will not be stopped. The battle is now joined. We understand the job that we collectively have to do. And working together, we will get it done in my state and in your state and in this nation. Thank you very much, and God bless you all. How's that?